Welcome back to Game of Thrones Winter's Coming. We have talked about several things at this point, but we've never really covered the aspects of war inside this game, and there are a few things that you should know about when it comes to war in this game. First of all, war is extremely expensive, and it's also pretty harsh. If you do something wrong, you will most likely get punished for it. I'm making a series of videos now, which is going to be a guide on how to avoid making mistakes and try to find out how you want to play the game within your budget or within your wishes at least, so keep that in mind. So first of all, you have to basically decide on how much you want to put into this game. If you're willing to spend a lot into this game, make sure that you buy the right stuff. If you are willing to not spend that much, then focus on the small things that might give you a small advantage compared to others. Furthermore, you will have to understand the basics of the game. There are several things such as what troop types to use, where to use it, when to use it. There's also the fact that there are stats, and as you can see, there's going to be a long, wide variety of stats, and understanding them all on first try can be difficult, but I will try and explain some of the main ones in a moment. Second of all, you also have to understand how to basically set up your account and how to maximize your account in terms of war stats and in terms of the decision making that you have regarding what you want to play as. But we're going to cover the different types that you can play as in a moment. As I mentioned before, there are different kinds of players in this game. There's a free-to-play group, there's a low to mid-tier spender, and there's a big spender, which is also commonly known as whales. The difference between these three groups are basically the amount of money they decide to spend in the game. This of course gives them some certain advantages if they know how to spend the money correctly. You can also be a big whale and a big spender while not knowing how to play or place your money correctly, which basically makes you grow just as fast as a free-to-play player. The huge thing about this specific game here, Game of Thrones, is that every single person has a role to play. And there are different playstyles which can help the alliance that you're in and can also help you fight against certain whales. As you can see here, we talked about a little bit about playstyle. There are basically 4 common known playstyles in this game. There is the farmer passive style, there's the support castle or zero castle style, there's the trap castle style, and there's the rally leader style. Usually rally leaders are the ones in the alliance that have the highest stats. This is mostly whales, but there are certain alliances that are rather new or rather low in terms of power and only have mainly free-to-play players. In this case, a free-to-play player that has the highest stats will also be a rally leader. But looking at the first playstyle we can see here, we have the farmer passive style. In this particular case, farmers are basically alts that are used to just farm in resources. Their role is to just supply the alliance and to keep the main accounts from basically growing even faster and make sure that there's no shortage of resources in that specific case. Some farming castles are also known as wolf castles, which can give a decent buff, but these things we'll go into a bit later in this game. There's also, of course, some people that just want to play the game passively. They just log in for the game for like 10 minutes and then they're out. Depending on what kind of alliance you're in and what your focus is, these players can be more common or less common. A general thing is though that most alliances have a bit of everything inside. So keep that in mind as well when you're picking your alliance and want to figure out what kind of playstyle you have. Second playstyle is the support castle or zero castle. Support castles are there to basically support the rally leader whenever he makes a rally, or to basically try and help the other castles within the alliance to hide their troops and keep their troops safe. Support castles can range from any BR, but most castles that are support castles tend to be in a lower aspect or lower part of the alliance, since they are worried about losing their troops if they unbubble. But that doesn't mean that they're completely useless or anything like that, since support castles are very important and can work as a safe zone for higher tier players and their troops so they don't get rallied or they can hide their troops in general. This is also a very important aspect to the game. You have to play with your mind and your brain rather than just charge into things, because if you just charge into things, then most likely you will end up losing everything. Zero casters are the ones that mainly also supply the rally leaders with troops in terms of rallies. These people are able to zero themselves out and not overgo their maximum capacity in terms of troops compared to their army size. But we are going to take a look at that much later, about how you can set up your castle to be a zero castle. Zero castles are also usually somewhat decent in stats, since you will be able to you have to be able to take solo attacks in case you get soloed. But at the same time, you also have to make sure that you can hide your troops and don't overgo your maximum amount of troops. Trap castles is the last playstyle that you have, and in this particular case, trap castles can work in two different ways. Either the trap castle is a low BR or power castle that's just empty, which tricks people into attacking them, and that reveals then information about the enemy that attacks you, which is valuable to find out how to counter them. The second option is to have a castle that is somewhat mid-tier in terms of power, but has a lot of low-tier troops inside. So when someone attacks it with a solo attack, they get their lord captured, and you hardly lose that many troops inside your trap castle. Of course, the problem with trap castle, the second version at least, is that once it's been attacked once, chances are that everyone knows that it's a trap castle, so you have to make it count that one hit that comes in, that it is valuable and something that's worth doing. Lastly, it's rally leaders. Rally leaders are probably the ones that will solo low tier people or low power people, and they're also the ones that will be in the top of the alliance in terms of stats, and they will do rallies on other whales to try and compete with them. Rally leaders have top stats. They're usually very flexible in that way of doing things, and they usually also have a lot of troops inside so they can be able to tank rallies. But of course, whichever style suits you, you have to figure out yourself. It also depends on what kind of alliance you are in and how strong you are in that specific alliance. Usually there's only a few rally leaders in alliances, a few trap castles, and then the rest are either farmer passive castles or support castles and zero castles. Usually that's also the best way to figure out how to find your place in the alliance, or just ask around to see what is basically needed in the alliance. But now we're going back to the game. Now that we have had a look at the type of players and playstyles that are in the game, it's important to understand how the different troops work. As you can see over here, we have a way of seeing how the different troops counter each other. Infantry counters spearmen, spearmen counters cavalry, and cavalry counters infantry. And in the middle we have bowmen. Because of this, it's a balance system in Game of Thrones, and a lot of people might think, well, if they go bowmen, then they should be fine. I mean, it's neutral to everything, and it works for everything. That's basically not the case. As you can see over here, there are different kinds of stats for each type of troop. These stats vary and gives them strengths and weaknesses, which either makes them better or worse in certain situations. Bowmen, however, are currently considered one of the worst units in the game. The main use for bowmen are probably harvesting, but due to their low morale, their low defensive stats, it's very easy to just get to them and make them retreat. Because of that, a lot of the trap casters that you can see inside the game often have bowmen inside. They have high damage, so if they can kill the enemy in like 1 or 2 hits, it limits the losses that you have in your trap castle. And also, it gives still some kind of pressure to the enemy. That's also very important to note that bowmen in general are not as usable when it comes to defending your castle behind the wall. The wall is very easily broken, so the bowman basically gets no time to fire off, and you're basically better off having the 3 other troop types. Now you might wonder, okay, what type should you take? That entirely depends on your playstyle, and it also depends on what kind of player you are. Whales usually have a mix of all 3 types, while mid to low spenders, or free to play, often end up deciding to focus on 2 types and leave the third one be. That's because to be able to compete with whales higher up, you will need to specialize in certain troops so you're able to counter them. That of course doesn't mean that you should only have that specific troop type inside your castle, but it also doesn't mean that you should solely forget about everything else. You have to keep in mind that this game is a strategy game, so information is basically key to how to progress in this game. The more information you can get about your opponents, the easier the game will be. If you know the opponent has an ace up their sleeve, it's probably a smart move to not just directly attack them. As you can see, in terms of stats, they are varied very much depending on the troop type. These changes scale up higher and higher, and at T4 level, they will be very much progressive and also very situational. Once you have decided on what type of player you are, you also know what to focus on. But of course, to be able to attack and win a match doesn't mean to just produce a whole lot of troops and just attack your enemy without having any thought about how to put up your castle or how to put up your account in general. Stats are super important in this game. You can see here, when we click here, that there are a lot of stats inside the game. These stats vary from economic bonuses to battle preparation, army bonus, commander active skill damage, army overall enhancement, enemy army weakening, great city upgrades, marching enhancements, leader expedition upgrade, anti-rebel upgrade, and other enhancements. This is of course a lot to take in, and it would take a lot of time to understand every single aspect of the game. Basically, this game comes down to how you counter the enemy, how your stats are compared to enemy, and how much your army size is in terms of your enemy. This of course also depends on the quality of your troops. Do you have a lot of tier 2 troops against an enemy's tier 3? Chances are that you'll probably end up losing unless you have an extreme amount that basically just overruns the enemy. You also have to keep in mind that once you have a tier 2 troop, that a tier 3 troop will be either double as good as that or 1.5 points as good as that. Which means that for every 1.5 tier 2 is worth 1 tier 3, or for every 2 tier 2 is worth 1 tier 3. And the same thing can be upscaled to tier 4. That of course means that tier 1s are almost 100% useless in this game. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a use. As I said before, you can do the trap card strategy and use T1s or T2s to basically try and capture your enemy while keeping the cost of it low, since they are much easier to train and don't cost as much resources to build up. Of course, you also have to keep in mind that there are other certain aspects of the game. There are dragons that can help you progress. There's equipment, which you also can take a fast look at here, that also helps you to progress. And there are commanders that helps you to progress. All of these in combination will help you prove if you're stronger than your enemy and if you can progress as a war-driven account. This doesn't mean that free-to-play doesn't have any space in here. Even free-to-play players have commanders, dragons, and also certain skills or equipments. It's just a matter of finding out how to maximize the value of your skills and your equipment and how to basically progress against the enemy. But keep in mind, information is key. The more information you have, the better it is. If you have a lot of good information and can work your way through, then you will realize that you can easily win battles. In this particular case, it's a battle against a rebel camp. I know there's only going to be cavalry, so a hard counter with spears. Because of that, I can keep my wounded low and I can keep my deaths low. This of course also applies to the enemy, because they can't protect themselves very well against the counter. They end up dying, and because of that you can't really know how to deal with your enemy unless you know what the enemy is running. For some it's easy to see, for others it's much more difficult. Whales in general are very difficult to find out what they're running. Even one report might not show what it is they have. But once you train yourself up, you start getting more experience by hitting rebuild camps or rebuild leaders or other things, then you will start to realize how the game works. But this is just a basic guide to explain how this entire thing is basically set together. And we will go into things in much deeper detail throughout this series, looking at badges, looking at commanders, and other things to help you improve your account. For now, this is going to be it. And if you enjoy the game, then feel free to follow my account as well. Put down a subscribe, put down a like. And of course, if you're interested in the Game of Thrones community, there's going to be a link down in the description below about the Game of Thrones Discord, and also a link for the game. But this time, it's all going to be from me, and I hope you all had fun, and hope you learned something, and see you for the next part of this fine little tutorial. Bye bye!